The pharmaceutical industry is a complex and fascinating field. It takes countless of people to bring a high quality product to the market. In the Qualitalks Podcast, I bring to you leaders, experts and innovators who will share their experiences and explain to us how they do it. Welcome to the Qualitalks Podcast. I'm Kugel, host, and my guest today is Thomas McMann. Thomas is the head of contracts at EPM Switzerland. And today we have a really interesting topic, contractors and consultants. So we're going to talk about why people who work in the quality area in the pharmaceutical industry should consider becoming consultants, independent contractors, and what it really means to be one. What are the challenges behind it, the advantages, what are the most hot roles at the moment, and of course, what you should expect earning and what benefits you would gain. So let's get to it. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to the Qualitalks Podcast. It's great to have you here and talk about a really cool topic about being consultant or a contractor and how to become one, the challenges and everything around it. So you are a head of contracts at EPM Scientific. So what is your specialization?
Yeah, so I suppose thank you for having me, first and foremost. It's a pleasure to be invited to be on your podcast. So I manage EPM Scientific's contracts business out here in Switzerland. We're based in Zurich. And we, I suppose, EPM in general focus on from the start to the end of a product. And we can support life science businesses through that whole journey. Specifically within Switzerland, we focus on quality and regulatory within the contracting consultant business, predominantly across pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical devices. So I suppose my job is to expand our business and grow EPM Scientific out here, and obviously support life science clients with the best consultants that are available within Switzerland and also across the wider Europe. As obviously Switzerland's quite a nice place to come and live and work. I've took advantage of that myself, moving from the UK 2.5 years ago.
What is the market, the pharmaceutical market in Switzerland? So basically, as far as I know, Switzerland is the biggest pharmaceutical market in Europe.
Pretty much so, yeah. I would say Switzerland it's sort of the central hub within Europe. I think for a lot of the major companies. Either their international headquarters are based in Switzerland or regional headquarters are based here. I think some crazy statistic that's like 30 to 35% of Switzerland's exports come from the pharmaceutical industry, which is quite a large percentage of a country's exportation of goods. And it just, it really is the hub, I think. I think one of the main reasons for that is that there's a huge amount of innovation in Switzerland. Traditionally, there's quite a lot of money that's in Switzerland, and a lot of companies invest very heavily into projects and new products. However, it's probably not the quickest of countries with these projects and products compared to other around the world. But I think that plays a major part within why it is a hub, because of that innovation, I think, within Switzerland.
But there are not that many big companies there, or how?
Yes,
Or there are
so yeah,
really a lot.
a lot. I mean, if you think, Roche, Novartis, Johnson and Johnson, CLAG, within the pharma industry. I mean, if you look Basel, for example, that's pretty much founded upon these big pharmaceutical companies that are there with the big Roche towers and the huge Novartis campus. They have big areas. I think, for example, Lonza, which is based in Visp, they pretty much own the whole of Visp in terms of the amount of people and how big the facility is there. And I think, I think, to be honest, that the biotech side of things is something that's increasing more and more now, specifically in Switzerland. I know for the likes of Biogen and CSL Behring, who are based in Solothurn, that they're building huge new, production facilities, which is massive, for Switzerland to have, such large scale investment and companies that are here producing, you know, the best products in the world, I suppose. Yeah, definitely, it's most companies if are in Switzerland.
Mhm. So also it's a hub also for smaller companies, biotech,
Yeah,
startups, and so on.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, I think one of the unique things, probably not unique, I think a lot of countries will do the same thing, but the universities in Switzerland are very high standard. And I know the university in Zurich, St. Gallen, Basel, but also in Lausanne, they have a lot of startup cultures within students, which will start their own products and look for investment. And there's a huge link between the universities and the companies within that. I think in Zurich there's a place called Technopark, and that's just startup companies that have links with the universities and things. Which is pretty cool, and I think it's good for I think a country like Switzerland because it can keep a lot of the young working professionals within the country, and not looking to go elsewhere for jobs and things. Um, but yeah, the small startup in Switzerland's I think just as big as the big players that are here.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good information, and I think there are a lot of people who actually live on the borders, like in Germany and in France, and they travel to Switzerland because they also get paid quite well, I believe. The people who work there because of the currency exchange, and
Mhm,
in general, the pay is
mhm.
I think is a bit higher there.
Yeah, I mean the I would say that the pay is high if you're living in for the likes of Germany or France, you're on the border of Switzerland. Naturally, your living costs are a lot less. Accommodation, food, etc., which is typically quite high in Switzerland, which is in comparison to the salaries that you get. But I think the biggest advantage for someone who's on the border that comes to Switzerland, that looks to move to Switzerland for work in that scenario, is the tax. I mean, you'd be
Mhm.
paying tax in Switzerland. So I'm pretty sure if you're earning the same amount of money in Germany, your tax would be a lot a lot more.
Yeah,
I know in France it would be
exactly.
a lot more. So I think that the biggest advantage obviously is the tax and the higher salary type stuff. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people on the border do use
Mm.
the advantage, I think, of being in that location. And I would if I was in someone's shoes and could do that as well.
So let us maybe talk a bit about consultancy and contractors. So we
Mhm.
have two terms here, and I believe they have a bit of different meaning. Being a contractor and a consultant. So what are the definition in this area?
Yeah. I mean, this is I'll put it out, it's more my definition, I
Hmm.
think, and the way I view things. It's not a in writing type thing. But I think over the past 4.5, years of me working specifically just in the contracting market across Europe, um, in my head and tell companies and clients is that there's a clear definition of the type of person that they may need and the type of service that consultants or contractors can give. Um, most people are contractors. They'll have a 6-month contract. They'll come in on a certain hourly rate, and they'll do a specific job, specific project where it'll be the hands-on type work. For example, you're building a new production line. You need to create a number of validation documents. It's hands-on. The grunt of the work. That would be typically a contractor. They'll get given a task. They come in, they execute, they leave. A consultant, um, which I've seen a lot more of, I think, in Switzerland than I have done in Germany. To be fair, is on par as well than other countries like France, Italy, and Spain, even the UK. People that have come from very senior roles, so quality directors, global VPs, and they're the consultant. And where that comes is that similar to me, I suppose, is that they want to give a consultative service. So they'll come into your business at probably a senior level or for a specific project to run that project. But they will be consulting you on how to do things and what strategy to put in place. And they're doing less of that hands-on creating documents, reviewing documents, type work, I think. And what a lot of companies get wrong is that they hire the consultant to do the contractor type position, and then it doesn't match, and then they end up coming in and telling the business that they're doing everything wrong, when really that business just wanted someone to come in and create these documents and then leave, which happens quite often. Which is why I think when I said that consultative, especially I think EPM, is all about giving that consultative approach on what is right, for the business. And I would say they're the two different types of consultant contractor that you could maybe be if you were entering into the market, I think. And depending, I suppose, on the level and jobs you've had before would maybe determine what type of positions you'll obviously get. And I think that would then put you in that category.
So if you're looking from the company's perspective, if they want somebody that comes for a short time and does some hands-on job like writing SOPs or reviewing some of the batch records and so on, so
Yeah.
what you said, they shouldn't aim for somebody with like a huge experience and like somebody who comes from a really high positions like a quality VP or something like this. So they should take somebody with a lot of hands-on experience with a specific task.
Yeah.
And somebody who loves doing not giving a lot of advice, but rather really technical.
Yeah, I would say so. And I don't want to ring fence certain people because that's unfair. I mean, I've worked with consultants who have been VPs that will come on and they'll do the hands-on work and they'll execute and they'll do that. There's people that can do both.
Yeah, but I guess it depends on what each of the side wants. So if somebody wants to be a consultant, he should really then question the job and make sure he's there to consult and not doing the technical work, and vice versa, probably.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I would say. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic because I can guarantee it. There'll be contractors out there that I would say you're a contractor that will probably say no, I'm a consultant. But it's just an opinion, and it's the way that I think I categorize it for clients, because I think once you explain it like that and a couple of people who are like that, it's then the client then understands what they need, and I think it will maybe help contractors or consultants maybe tailor the type of positions that they go for that maybe might play for their strengths.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea really to define it as you do, because that way everybody has his expectation in the right place. So why should people strive to become consultants? So a lot of people first of all, people who become consultants have quite a lot of experience in the industry. They probably have more than 10 years at least of experience in the industry in different areas. So we are talking right now about quality, but quality assurance, probably also quality control, and people also who work in aseptic manufacturing who then go to an independent way. So why should people leave a really safe job where they work like many years and they have like a really great position as a head of department or a VP of quality and so on? So why should they do the move and become independent?
Yeah. So I'll go through the benefits, I think, of why people do so, but then I'll also discuss the challenges, just so I'm not one-sided and
Yeah.
selling too much
So
for
let's
being a
start with
consultant.
the benefits, and of course there are challenges because I can imagine so
Yeah,
many of them.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
good. See, so I mean, I suppose the first big one which springs to mind is the flexibility. Right? As a contractor, consultant, typically you do get more flexibility of working from home, being on site. Naturally, you can pick the projects that you want to work. If you want to work for 6 months and then have 3 months off, you can do that as a contractor, because you pick the projects which you want to go on. Typically, I've seen that the consultant contractors do get more flexibility in a company than, say, maybe some permanent people, which doesn't always make the permanent people. That's another challenge which I'll come on to. But the flexibility is, I think, a big part of why people transition into to contracting. And that flexibility could also be stuff around, maybe just becoming a mum, right? And you're coming back to work, or you want to work part-time 3 days a week, or you have other family type of scenarios that you want to go, and just that type of working suits you better than maybe a permanent position of the flexibility you can get from a company. The other second big one, which is probably one of, I'm not going to say main because it's not everyone is, but it's money, right? There's no saying it. Consultants, contractors do typically earn more than permanent staff members, and there's a number of reasons why that they get paid more. That insecurity of jobs. They don't get any of the benefits of being, holidays, sickness, bonuses, the other things you get within a permanent type environment, you don't get as a contractor. But coming from a permanent position into a contract role or thing, you will, I would say, you will earn more. Depending if you're a global VP and of Roche Novartis and you're fairly high up the chain, it's probably going to be very similar for you, I think. Another point which I think a lot of maybe people don't think about is learning and that whole development piece. From you being a contractor consultant and going from one 6-month project to another, they're two different completely companies, two different quality management systems, two different ways of doing certain things. And I think the best, I mean, in my view anyway, the quickest you can develop your career and stuff is your learning process. And I think by going into different companies and learning how they do things is massively advantageous to somebody. I suppose that also comes with that you won't get bored, right? You're not going to do the same job, the same work in the same company and maybe not get rewarded for it and not maybe get as much career progression as maybe you would want within a certain company. I think another point, maybe more for the consultants that are maybe coming, is that you can very quickly get away from politics, right? In companies, there's a lot of politics, there's a
Yeah,
lot of how you do things, there's a lot of things. And I think with being a contractor consultant,
I heard it
that is,
already from
yeah,
someone.
yeah, that is none of your business, right? You don't need to get involved. You can finish at 6 o'clock, leave the office and go, and you're not paid to be involved and worry about that stuff. And that can sometimes be a big motivation for people, is that they're just sick of the 15 years of going around in circles, taking a long time to get things signed off, and other XYZ, and people tend to move on that point, I think.
Exactly.
Um,
And also, when
yeah,
you come to a company, you get paid a lot of money for consultancy, especially because you're there to give advice. So it probably would be also foolish not to listen to you. So it's easier to move things around. But then if nobody listens and they doesn't want to, then basically it's
yeah,
their problem, right? So you
yeah,
don't have to have sleepless nights and think, okay, where is my department going? What direction? Nobody is choosing the right path.
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
great. That's right.
yeah, yeah. I think another benefit as well, as I suppose, depending on the type of person you are, I suppose, is networking. Being a contractor consultant, you meet a lot of people. You're from different parts of the world, different companies. You build some good friendships, and I know a lot of people that like being a contractor because they get to meet a lot of really cool people in the industry or work with a lot of cool senior leaders that they get to work under and take the best of everybody that they encounter, I think. So yeah, so there's some of the, there'll probably be tons more that consultants will be able to say why they enjoy or what the benefits are of being a consultant contractor.
Can I, before you probably want to get to the challenges right now, but before that, I want to ask you about something that you mentioned. So about
Yeah.
learning. So from one
Mhm.
side, as people, we always want to learn something new, and going from company to company is the best way, especially
Mhm.
for somebody who was 20 years in the same company, and things get a bit maybe boring, and you want to see some different processes and learn from different people and see how things are done. And I think the best consultants are the one who um, who've worked in different companies, have so much information that they gather. They know what type of process would fit this or other company, and it's a great way for learning. But a lot of consultants have huge experience already. But what about people who are not 20 or 30 years in the industry? They're like 7 years, 5 years. um,
Mhm.
would you think they can become contractors,
Yeah.
do technical
Mm.
work, and by
Mhm.
doing this really speed up and hike their career to a different level? Because as we said, we probably usually the consultants are have huge amount of experience, 10, 20,
Mhm.
30 years. But is it possible for people who are 5 years in the business go for technical jobs
Mm.
as contractors, and then move from one company to another, and by doing that they can achieve so much knowledge and really get high position and then permanent jobs in companies?
Yeah. I mean, my opinion would be is yes. We work with a ton of people that are 5 to 10 years experience as contractors. And if you think that you're 30-year-old, 30, 35, you haven't got a family, you're quite free to be able to do things, why shouldn't you travel the world or
Mhm.
Europe, get positions, learn as much as you can, get paid still a good salary and experience life while being able to learn, right? If you study at university for X
Mhm.
amount of years and put that much effort in, why not get the most out of it, in doing so? But yeah, I think you can definitely, you'll learn a lot. And I think someone with maybe 7 years experience who's worked in three different companies, been on some big projects, doing execution, hands-on work, that's had an impact, made improvements, that has that knowledge, in my opinion, should be seen as greater than someone that's just been 7 years in one company, because that other person has in my view, more experience, that have been in the deep water, they've put out more fires and seen different ways of doing things. So if you're going to hire a permanent person, you've got that one person who probably could add a lot more to your business within that sentence. I mean, saying that, there's always a counter counter to everything, is that, if you're a permanent, manager looking to do that, you might think that that person's a risk, that in a year's time they might take another contract role. But in this day and age, I don't think there's any security in any job, that really you're in permanent or contract. And I think anyone is likely to move for something, another opportunity, or whatever. I think the average is like 3 to 4 years with that people stay in permanent positions at the moment. Um, it's typically people are
Mhm.
looking to move on to that next step, or that next learning environment, or to run away from politics, whichever way whichever way you look at it. But yeah, I hope that answered your question in a
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah. So I think it is so. So just to summarize, so people who are about 5 years, from 5 years maybe and up, in some pharmaceutical, in a position, let's say in quality, so it's a good idea for them also to look for some contracts, basic contracts in small companies, if they seek to progress, because not in every company you get the opportunity to do it. So there are companies that when they have you as a permanent
Mhm,
employee, they may say, okay, you're in this department, we trained you this and this time, now you need to sit here 5 years, and we don't want you to move from
mhm,
here. Then you sit in one position 5 years, and you don't have the opportunity to keep learning, because for some reason they keep you from it. But if
mhm.
you go as a consultant, and if you see yourself rising higher in the ranks, from 5 years and up, it is a possibility that
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But I think it's not going to be like you can just go and do one 6-month contract and then go and get another senior
Mm.
position. It's
Yes,
something that
several.
you
Like you
yeah,
go from
yeah,
several years, right? So
yeah,
you go
correct.
from
Yeah.
a position
Mhm.
to position. You do this, you do that. You gain a
Yeah,
lot of experience from
yeah.
really different areas. But from your point of view, 5 years of experience would be enough to jumpstart you in a good consultancy or
Yeah,
contractor direction.
definitely.
Then.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
perfect. So that's good information for everybody who may want to consider it, because some may think, okay, I need to stay in permanent position for many years, but
Mhm.
it's good to point out that you can do it earlier also. So
Mhm.
let's get to the
Yeah,
challenges and the
yeah.
disadvantages, because for every some thing great, there are also some things that
Yeah.
one must consider.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, depending on where I suppose you move or what contracts you pick up, I suppose, a lot of you might have worked with a lot of contractors that come from the UK or Ireland, or, they're away from their family for 2 weeks at a time, that, you don't see your kids. That I think some of the biggest disadvantages, I suppose, if you're have a family and stuff, is that you can be away from your family, and then that is, for some people, which rightly so, is, the most important thing in life. Um, and if yeah, so moving away, being away from family in new countries, maybe being by yourself. I know there's definitely some places in Switzerland where I couldn't think, I couldn't imagine myself working, being in a little village somewhere in the mountains. There's challenges of that side of things. Um, I think that I think we've just gone through it as a world, right? We've just had coronavirus that's been over the past 6-7 months. Typically, in a company, the first thing you're going to do, if you need to save costs, is get rid of the most expensive disposable things that you can, right? And typically they're consultants. I know businesses here in Switzerland that let go 20 contractor, temp type people, even, temps that were on their payroll, that were getting paid a salary, but like a fixed term type contract, that just completely took them out. 20, 30 people just let go because they were the easiest to save costs in it. And ultimately, that's the biggest risk, right? And that could happen in a permanent position. You do obviously have a better notice period, so you have a bit of a buffer, and it's more difficult to do that with certain laws, I know, across Germany and Switzerland. But that's a big risk. And I think if you speak to many permanent people that have been in a position for a number of years, that would probably be one of their biggest concerns, is that lack of security, I think, with it. And that comes, I think it takes a certain type of person that is comfortable with that lack of security, the uncertainty type stuff, I think.
So basically, um, the problem also that you may have time between projects. If you don't find the next one, it means that even if your contract is over, you weren't let go, but the contract is over.
Yeah.
It means that if you hadn't found anything yet, then you may get stuck. So you need
Yeah.
really to make sure that you have a safe net
Yeah.
of money, or you get paid enough for one
Mhm.
year of a contract to keep you above water for another half a year
Yeah.
at least,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that people are, again, the uncertainty of it, but that's again another reason why you get paid more as a contractor, right? If you work for 6 months but you get the salary of someone who gets
Exactly.
works for 12 months, you have that risk. And that's the big financial thing. If and I'll come on to it later on, actually, about how to get contracts and how to get the best type of contracts, which will stop you from having them long gaps of work and things like that. But that's something that is definitely a challenge for a lot of people, which this year has, I know a number of consultants that for this year have spent more time not working than working this year, due to coronavirus, um, which is difficult. But the market's on the rise, and everything's getting a bit more back to normal, so that's
That's
a good
good
thing.
news. That's good
Yeah,
news.
yeah. I think, a bizarre one, which I know this for the UK. I don't know if it's impacted in Switzerland or Germany, but depending on what stage you are in your life, if you're a contractor, it's very difficult to get loans or mortgages because you don't have a permanent position and a fixed
Mm,
salary. And that's something that I know is difficult. But on the counteract of that, if you own your own business, if you have a limited company or a Freiberufer, which I think's the sole trader freelancer within Germany, if you have that status of owning your company, then it's a bit different, I think, because um, you then have a salary per year that you pay yourself from certain work. But that's something maybe more for listeners in the UK, I suppose,
yeah.
or elsewhere.
No, but I think it would be also correct in Germany, because if you open your own company,
Hmm.
even so, so in Germany you have also the option to be a freelancer, which is
Hmm.
one thing. It's not a company, you are just a freelancer. It's called Freiberufler.
Yep.
And
I said it wrong. My German's not that good. Yeah.
and then you have the option to open a company like a limited, but it's not that easy um, to open such a company here. It's like in the UK, because you need to bring money in it. There's a lot of bureaucracy to open it, and also when you open it, you're like 3 years blocked from getting credit or getting loans, because
Yeah.
nobody wants to take the chance.
Yeah.
And it's one point that I didn't think about at first, about disadvantage, but you have a really good point, because somebody who is a freelancer probably is even riskier,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if he doesn't have a limited behind him to cover the costs, right?
Yeah. 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 No, and I think some other points you might have seen, maybe. I don't know. I know a number of permanent people that have seen is that, consultants that will come in, say, for a 6-month period tend to sometimes can happen is that, they get the hard shoulder from permanent staff.
Mm,
You think there's
yeah.
what's the point in making an effort to build a relationship with this person? I'm not gonna know him in 6 months, or her,
Yeah,
should I
and
say,
it's a big
so
mistake. It's a huge
yeah,
mistake. I think
massive.
it's a huge mistake, because I also talked about it also um, uh, in different podcasts with when I did some podcasts with consultants like
Mhm.
Alex Hall. I think we talked about this issue that and with other also with other people who were consultants on the podcast, and we said that you some companies bring the consultants and they put them in a different room and say, okay,
Yeah,
do the
yeah,
job. So usually
yeah,
they have some sometimes they're not allowed to put the consultants in the same room, because they need special conditions, etc.
yeah. Mhm.
But it's really bad to really cut them off from the staff for several reasons. So first of all, when the consultant comes and you didn't learn anything from him, because let's say you have somebody, you brought a consultant contractor to make some changes or update your SOPs, batch records, so on and so on, and he left, he did the job, he left, and you learned nothing. You just
Yeah,
lost a lot of money. So consultants usually come with a lot of experience, and it should be a privilege for people, for permanent worker, to go and
mhm,
work with such knowledgeable
mhm,
people, to learn from them, and really keep the knowledge inside the company after the
yeah,
contractors leave.
mhm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things when I speak to clients is that we don't want to hire a consultant. Oh, we want the knowledge in-house. We don't wanna, to take any of them. I said, "Okay, well, think of what you can actually take from that consultant and implement, which can
Mhm.
actually benefit your business."
Exactly.
So they tend to think the other way around, when really it's if you're paying that money for someone, you should want to get every last bit of knowledge that you can from their experience, which can benefit you. Um, and I think that the biggest thing, it makes it an uncomfortable environment to work in, right? People want to go into work and say hi, share a coffee, and meet people. That's the biggest thing why people go into the office. Right? People that have experienced this over the past 6 months working from home by yourself can be boring, can be lonely. You miss that interaction with human beings, and I think having different people come in your organization and spices things up a bit, um, and what you can learn from people and just meet people because that's one of the points I'll mention later on about networking. And you could meet someone 10 years ago in your career, and it could be full circle, and you could use their knowledge or their help or something later on which could benefit you. And I think ring fencing, as you said, the consultants off to things. It's yeah. I don't think it's just, in my opinion, a silly way of doing things. You're not getting your money's worth out of people if you do it like that.
Exactly. So just take advantage of the really
Yeah,
from the knowledge, and
yeah,
yeah, and people want to socialize. And thanks God I have the podcast because that way I get to socialize a bit
yeah,
with people, and
yeah.
that's really amazing. And so during the COVID situation, so you said a lot of contractors lost their jobs because the companies need to do some cuts in the budget. But does it work remotely? So we said that one of the, let's say, it can be advantage and disadvantage that you need to travel. So some people who
Mhm,
are not really attached, don't have a family, they it's a great opportunity to travel the country, the world. It's amazing.
mhm,
Learn
mhm,
to get to know, network, etc. And it's also a disadvantage for people with families who cannot leave them
mhm,
for a long time, or it's difficult to leave them because I know that they
mhm.
do it sometimes for per week, per month, so and then they travel back, but it can be difficult. So
Yeah.
is it did we, during the COVID situation, did we move a bit further and um, understood that we can also do good consultancy remotely? Does it
Yeah,
work right now?
yeah. Very much so. Yeah, very much so. I think obviously the world was forced to make changes and adapt, and businesses had to learn how to onboard people remotely. They had to learn how to set people up remotely. Even us, as a recruitment business, we had to adapt into that environment. I think we hired 20 people this week in our London business, which started, remotely. And it's just, I think the first few months of that, of February, March, April, when it really started to kick off, you could say. Obviously, everyone put the brakes on, and it was, this is new, challenging. We're not prepared. Then it took a couple of months to get to grips and move things on, but definitely much so. I mean, we have onboarded consultants, contractors with companies that are still working remotely. That are doing CSV activities, that are doing documents, etc. And they're working remotely for the time being. And it is slowly now starting to come back on site and have people on site um, with things. But that has been probably a good thing for a lot of the consultants, which we've mentioned about having to be away from home or family or travel quite a lot, is that they were allowed to work from home for 6 months. They didn't have to bother with all that stuff with it, I think.
Mhm. Good. So did we cover all the challenge and benefit, the challenges or the problems that people should
Yeah,
consider? Yeah,
I
I
would
think
off the
so.
top of my head. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So if we are talking about the quality arena, so
Hmm.
what types of consultancy jobs or contractor jobs, what are the typical areas or the roles that
Hmm.
can people from the quality arena occupy?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think I'll discuss maybe three or four things that are more trends. I think at the minute that we're seeing, naturally, it's going to be specific to Switzerland because it's the country and the only market that we work in. Um, there's a huge amount of work in validation activities, commissioning, qualification, type work at the moment, which we've seen over the past 4 months a huge amount of demand for. And I think that's just because of the amount of companies that are building new production facilities within Switzerland. Um, Production lines, etc., or they've been approved and they need to go back and redo certain activities. Um, I've never seen in the past 4 years. I've never seen as many similar projects within that area on at the same time over the course of this year. So, if you're a validation consultant engineer, working commissioning, utilities, validation stuff, there's a tons of hot jobs out there at the moment, specifically in Switzerland, I think, on that.
Mhm.
Another, I suppose, not weird, but I think for some reason over the past, say, 6 months, we've seen a huge demand in lab technicians, and I know that isn't quality. It covers in QC, to be fair, in the quality
Mhm.
control. There's a lot of QC departments
Yeah.
which we're putting lab technicians into, and I think that's just because A, there's most companies, pharma, are looking to try and produce a vaccine for coronavirus. And B, there's tons of new products with this innovation point I mentioned within Switzerland. Um,
So what do
whi
those
which
technicians do actually in the lab?
so there's a lot of work that are doing in just general hands-on work in the lab, a lot of analytical
Ah, okay.
type
So
work and
actually, laborants and actually
yeah,
quality control analysts. So usually
yeah,
those
yeah,
roles are permanent, but it's interesting
yeah,
because I wouldn't think that it's really beneficial to take to take
mhm,
contractors in this job type because you usually need to train them for at least a half
yeah,
a year and
yeah,
you need to make sure that they comply. So it means
yeah.
that it's quite a long term contract.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, or the 18 months,
Okay,
to
yeah.
18-month type contract. But I do also think that has been made due to coronavirus, I think. If we're going over the past 6 months, I think it's just been specifically within companies wanting to do that, another innovation that maybe the skill sets they have in-house are spread too wide with certain projects and things that are on the go type things. Um, but I suppose you mentioned it, batch record review, SOPs,
Yeah.
the classic quality type work is always there for contract positions, I think. The engineering space is there with it, I think. That's typically where you find a lot of the temp contracting positions is around that. It is within quality,
Yeah.
and then
So
and them engineering.
engineers with knowledge in aseptic manufacturing or
Yeah,
tech transfers and
yeah,
right.
mhm, yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of them type of projects on at the moment, I think, and I think specifically for Switzerland as well, because there's a lot of headquarters and regional headquarters, which I mentioned, that are in Switzerland. They typically get quite a lot of tech transfer projects because of companies saying the US or elsewhere wanting to centralize a lot of their major products and things. So they want them in Switzerland. So they'll move a lot of that stuff over here.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that a lot of what you mentioned, like batch reviews and system validations and so on.
Mhm.
So I think it would be the same for the rest of the world too,
Yeah.
because it's something that it probably also depends on the weaknesses of the systems and the companies and the probably the I don't know warning letters that the companies get or
Yeah.
where the institutions look at right now during the
Yeah.
audits where they find the weaknesses in the systems, and it
Mhm.
probably would be a lot to do with validations
Yeah.
and the general systems in place. But I think computer system validation is a really hot topic right now
Yeah,
everywhere.
very much so. Yeah, very much so. I think if you think of a contractor, is they're like firefighters, right? They come in and they put out fires. You have a warning
Mhm.
letter, you've got a big project, you'll get four contract consultants to come in and put out that fire for you. To do so is a way that we sort of way I look at it with the firefighting type thing. Um, but yeah, there's, as you mentioned, the CSV type stuff as well is quite hot at the moment. Why do you think that is in terms of like the CSV type stuff
So I
has
think
been
it's because first of all, the FDA concentrates a lot right now on computer
Mhm.
system validation and data integrity in general, and I think that also the pharma industry is a bit behind technologically,
Mhm.
because it's quite difficult. It demands a lot of work to validate systems or change systems. So a lot of pharma companies work with old systems that don't
Mhm.
comply with all the regulations. and that's
Mhm.
why they use the systems that are 20 years old and more, and they are not compliant because it costs money to change them and a lot of work, and probably a lot of people don't understand a lot about the technical issues because a
Mhm.
lot of people who worked at the QA.
Mhm.
So I did also a great podcast about it, about the, data integrity and computer system validation, and I talked to an expert, and
Mhm.
he also Daniel, and he also explained that people from his experience that
Mhm.
work in the quality, they're not always good with IT. So it's
Mm.
understandable. So a lot of people are good with science, they're good with chemistry, they're good with quality, but they're not tech savvy,
Yeah.
and they
Mhm.
don't really know where to look for. And that is the problem. So you need somebody who, from one side, understands quality and GMP, and the other side, who is really good with IT. And it's not
Yeah.
that easy to find this combination of people, and
Mhm.
somebody who has all this knowledge. And this is why people that do this validation inside the company, they sometimes oversee things that
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
lack this IT knowledge. And
I think yeah, I think that's why there's a lot of I always see it that there's a lot of people from IT that will move into sort of CSV roles. Um, from an SAP background, and certain things, IT integration, and they'll move into a CSV type position, a project, and start to learn the regulations. And a lot, to be fair, a lot of the best CSV people that we know do have a mix, I think, of that, which is probably a good thing from what you've just said.
yeah, so I hope it changes, that people get more specialists. But I think we come back to the point that you should bring the consultants and learn from them, so you
Mm.
keep the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if it won't have it won't be sensible to bring a consultant for every system that you change,
Yeah.
right? So you need really to learn from them.
Mhm.
So, how do you find the best contracts, and where do you look for? So, I don't know if you can say in years. So, I would prefer if we could talk generally, not only in Switzerland. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you look for it?
Mhm. So there's the standards. So typically, contracting positions aren't really advertised. So if you look at LinkedIn, you'll see that 9/10 of them are all permanent type positions. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that a lot of the consultant contracting type positions normally sit with that with the hiring managers directly and aren't really involved with talent acquisition, which are normally doing a lot of the hiring for the permanent type roles. Um, so that means, okay, well, how do you find a contracting role if they're not if a lot of them aren't typically advertised, if they're not advertised by the recruitment companies, I suppose, because the recruitment companies will advertise them, but Roche, Novartis won't typically advertise consultant type positions. It'll be all permanent ones. And other than looking on LinkedIn, and following recruitment businesses that work within quality in your area, um, I would always highly advise. There was a really interesting podcast which a guy called Lee Demont did in Zurich, who I know he's a rec to rec guy. He runs his own business. He worked in recruitment for 15 plus years, I think, maybe more. I don't know if I found him. And he put a post up on post saying, "Do you know the right recruiter for you? Do you know a recruiter that could get you a position?" And there was a huge number that people didn't know the best. He did a cool podcast about how to find the right recruiter. So and ones obviously you can trust and that can give you the positions. So I think if you're looking on LinkedIn, connect with some senior recruiters within different recruitment businesses so you can see on what type of positions that they're advertising, and network with them. And I think that word there, network, is probably the biggest thing that you can do to get consultant type positions. And that there's loads of things it reverts back to, as in, if you're a consultant and working in a company, network within that company. Try and add value in any way in any department that you can. The best contractors that aren't out of work, that's what they're doing. They're adding value in different projects. They're speaking to different managers, speaking to permanent staff, keeping your ear to the ground if there's any issues or stuff you can help with and whatnot. Um, it's self-marketing, I suppose, and there's definitely a few things I've just said in that sentences that could be topics within themselves you could speak about for 30 minutes. But networking is one of the biggest things to get new contracts, and that's networking with other contract consultants as well, um, because they're the ones that might finish a contract and move on to a new project, and you could have a quick 10-minute call with them, and they could say, "Hey, I'm at Roche. We're actually looking for 3 consultants. My manager's in real need. Are you available?" And this person goes, "Yeah, I am actually." And then it's just about who you know type thing. It is one of the big points, I
Mm.
think.
So to jumpstart your career, so let's assume you don't know any consultants yet.
Yeah.
So the first thing would be to find a good recruitment consultancy
Yeah.
agency
Mhm.
that specializes in contractors,
Yeah.
and start thinking about what you want and really research, think about what you want to do and research what is needed in the
Mhm.
market, and probably a good consultant, good recruitment consultant can give you that information.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
so I guess it's the only way if those jobs are not advertised. After you're already in, get contacts,
Yeah.
get to know the people who work, because usually um, companies hire more than one consultant or
Yeah.
contractor. So you can. So I've seen it that many of them they seem to know each other from
Yeah.
some other job. So it's like a small
Yeah.
market
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right there. So it's a small network, and it always helps. So
It helps.
and then
Definitely.
you bring job and help others to find a job if you hear about openings, right?
Yeah.
So this is, and are there other additional
A
ways?
couple. Yeah. There's things. So I think one of the things is go to trainings. There's a lot of, there's a medical device one in Switzerland called RAPS, specifically for regulatory affairs. There's tons of others, in quality and other things, is that go to them events. So go to events, go to trainings, network with people, because the people that are going to these events and trainings, etc., are normally senior people within businesses, that going there to extract, to learn about a new regulation or a new way of doing something that they'll then go and implement back in. So that, again, it comes down to networking. But a good thing's going to events and going to trainings, and A, you're going to learn some new things, and B, you'll meet new people, to do that. Um, yeah, I think the ultimate thing is, I suppose, is do a good job. Right? It's pretty, there's no secrets. You go in, you do a good job, you deliver a good service, um, and then that company, if they ever need, hopefully, that type of work again in the future, hopefully you'll get a call, because you'll have networked, and um, you'll have reached out to the right people. But it all comes down to, right, if you do a bad job or don't do a good service, it doesn't matter how many people you're not going to get another contract, because
Right.
as you mentioned, we're a small industry. Recruiters know each other. Everyone knows the same people, the same managers, and all the contractors tend to know each other. So the biggest thing's networking. The second biggest thing is doing a good job, I think. And if you do them as a contract consultant type thing, you, you should be okay with continuing getting good projects.
Mhm. So before a person does that move, and that big move, and becomes independent, what question should the person ask himself to make sure that he's built for this job, and he has really the tools to do the job? Because as you mentioned, it's really important to do a good job, and you need to make sure you can do it. Otherwise, you harm your reputation, and
Yeah.
you have a big problem then in this arena.
Yeah, very much so. I think just be honest, I suppose, with yourself, right? If you're applying for a quality director position and you've never been a quality director, and you somehow get the job, 9 times out of 10, it's not really going to happen. But if it's I'm trying to think of an example of whether, say, for example, there's a remediation project for an FDA warning letter, and you've been hired as a quality project manager to run this whole project. If you've got 8 years experience, but you've never actually really led a project and done that side of things, some people are really talented and they learn on the job very quick and they'll be able to be fine. But there's some scenarios is just be sensible about the jobs that you're going to take. Know your limitations, know your strengths, and play into it. The same as you would if you were a permanent employee, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
There's certain things that you're good at that you'll excel. There'll be things you'll work on as
Mhm.
weaknesses.
Yeah, but
And
I
I think
think
it's
it's a bit maybe
yeah,
a bit different because in a permanent job you would say, okay, it's a company that I know well, and usually you say, you in a permanent job you want to stretch yourself. So, and
yeah,
I think it's also okay because in a permanent job, it's okay for you to jump into something that you have never done because okay, I have 6 months for somebody to teach me, or there is the time that the one that leaves the role, he teaches you, and then you grow into the role. But I guess as a consultant you can it's not something
yeah,
that you can afford because you're expected to come there and start working and
yeah,
bringing value from the first day.
yeah, yeah, correct. I think that if you get it wrong, the implications are a lot worse as a contractor, right? Because ultimately, it's your reputation that's on the line. Every contract that you do, it's your reputation, and there's always a high expectation when you're hiring a contractor to come in because you're paying a lot of money. You've hired them. You want them to come in and hit the ground running and go through the training manuals quicker than people in permanent do. And there's that expectation that you should get, that from them. Which in some ways is unfair because everyone's a human being and everyone learns the same way. And if the trainings, I know some companies that will have trainings that could last up to 3 weeks of so many modules to do, um, and they expect contractors to go through them quicker than permanent, and it's yeah, I can understand it, but again, everyone's human, right? So, but yeah, yeah, it's just about knowing what you can do and doing that, I suppose. But sometimes you have to take risks, I suppose. And that's the only way you learn, really, isn't it? If you put yourself out of your comfort zone, and push yourself, that could be a benefit.
Mhm. Exactly. So, first of all, know the area in which you
Mhm,
apply as a contractor.
mhm,
So, you should really know it and be able to contribute really quickly and
mhm.
know to push yourself to learn new things. And as we said, it's really good for contractors. So, basically, with time, when you go from one job to another, you really learn from the process, and also you also learn from the permanent employees in this company and the other consultants that you work with. So you basically teach each other and you grow. And I know also that sometimes consultants prefer to come as a pair because there are one right answer. Sometimes you need to play. Chess with each other and really to challenge each other to bring
Yeah.
the best results. So sometimes
Mhm.
you just need to make sure maybe that you know somebody that also there to give you some push and maybe some help. But if you're alone, make sure that you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. 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 Very much
Yeah.
so.
So now the person knows, okay, I can do it, I want to be a consultant. So so let's talk a bit about the benefits. So as a consultant, the only benefit that you get is money. So you get no other thing as permanent employees. So that's why we said you earn a bit more. So how much can a consultant um, earn? So what is the range?
Yeah. I think from a if we take about the positions that we've discussed that are the engineering, validation, batch record, a CSV, etc. Depending on your experience, it'll probably range from about 90 Swiss francs to about 120 Swiss francs per hour,
Hmm.
gross. So, if you're working that into a salary, roughly going to be about, you're that 90 francs, it'll be 170 to 180,000 Swiss francs. The 120 francs gross, you're going to be at that range of over 200. 220. And I know the rates in Germany are typically higher than Switzerland, so you could even increase that from 100 to 130, 40 euros, I think, for senior good people in that bracket. Um, it is typically what the common range. I think it's from EPM's standpoint, that's our sweet spot. The type of market that we work is that mid to senior level type people, within them hands-on type positions, and that's typically the hourly rates that we get. If you're a consultant, you're going to be charging over 150, 160 plus north per hour, in euros, and probably the same in Swiss francs as well.
So how do you know your worth, and how do you negotiate for a better salary?
So obviously, as a recruiter, I don't want anyone to negotiate. I'm keep kidding. But no, I think it depends. If you're not a, we'll go from the whole spectrum from what we said. So if you're that 7 years experienced person it's your first contract position, you'll know what the market rate. You'll maybe know what hourly rates are out there. Typically, you'll be on the lower end side of things, and that then can be quite difficult to try and negotiate a higher rate because you haven't got the experience to sort of back up why you should get a higher rate, I suppose. But the biggest thing, I suppose, if you're a seasoned contract consultant, stand your ground. Don't know your worth. Do your research. Speak to other consultants that within your network and ask what hourly rate they are. They might not tell you, but if you build good relationships and you know people, you'll eventually start to paint a picture the same as what recruiters do in terms of what the average type rates are for certain positions. And I think what a lot of people this year probably hasn't helped with things because companies have naturally decreased a lot of the hourly rates because of coronavirus and trying to save money from certain aspects, which we can understand. But a lot of consultants and contractors fall in the trap where a client will have a bad budget because a client typically might not have hired a lot of contract consultants before, so they don't know what they should really pay. They try and mirror it a little bit off a permanent type person. That then makes our job really difficult because we have to find a really, really good person for money that just you're not going to get. And then you end up having to propose a lower hourly rate to these people than normal, and they'll accept it because maybe they haven't had a job for 4 months, 6 months. And then a lot of people can end up being ring fenced because as soon as you take a lower rate, it's very difficult to then start getting back up the food chain in terms of them rates because naturally speaking, with recruiters, you're transparent. You'll say what your current hourly rate is, and that's what the recruiter will try and give you the same because it's the same, right? And if the recruiter's got a low budget and they can't give you more than what you'd maybe like, it's one of them things. But I think that's why there's three parties that are there. There's the candidate, there's the recruiter, and then there's the end client. And naturally, everyone has to get something of it, right? So it whittles down. But that's when about knowing the good recruiter, right? Knowing the good recruiter that will get you the good hourly rate contracts or that will be able to push the client higher because the recruiter knows and understands the value that you can bring. And that's the recruiter's job. The recruiter should be pushing the client to pay more because that's going to make you happy and it's going to get you the job.
But I guess the recruiter, the consultants, they point out probably what you can get for your range because, as you said, it's also beneficial for the recruitment consultant that the person gets paid more because you probably get some percentage of the trade, right? So. You really then need to trust the recruitment consultant to give you advice on that, and then you just need to approach and explain what are exactly your strengths and your expertise, and according to that, you can set the rate.
Yeah, so it's a bit from a recruitment standpoint, I suppose, to educate people how a contract recruiter will make money for the business. Is there's the candidate hourly rate, then the recruitment agency will put a certain amount of margin on top of that rate. So it could be 20% margin on top of, so €100. The recruitment company will want, 20% margin, so that's then 120. The client budget could be 140. The client budget will be 120, so that the margin that they'll take is there. So it's not typically taken upon, if you earn more money, we earn more money, because it's on a permanent type recruitment. That's how it would work. The higher salary that we get you, our margin then becomes more. But on a contracting side of pieces, that we're pretty ring fenced to a certain degree of what the client budget will be if we can't increase them, because we have to factor in a lot of costs within a specific number, and that typically results in our margin becoming less if the candidate is, knows their value, doesn't budge on their hourly rate, and yeah, it is how it works like that.
Okay, so thank you for those tips. So, Thomas, do you want to add something else, something that we haven't spoken about and you wanted to address?
I think that, being a consultant and contractor has tons and tons of benefits to it. There is a few negatives, I suppose, but I think it's very much down to the individual. And I always say that, if someone's always thought about doing it, just do it. Just start, do it, and see where it goes. Be the same thing with your podcast, right? You'll have always maybe thought about doing it, and then you eventually just did it, and you're now here. So just go for it, and you're always going to get a job somewhere else if something doesn't work out right.
Exactly. So you can always get back to a permanent job, but I guess also while you're looking, you don't have to quit your job. So you can first look for the first contractor job, and without quitting and losing your safe net.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I would say it's obviously a lot harder at the beginning, but the more experience you have, it gets a lot easier, and then the benefits will obviously be a lot higher.
Yeah. So, Thomas, thank you very much for all this interesting information that I hope really would help a lot of people in the pharma industry, in the quality arena, that want to make the jump, or maybe haven't considered it, but maybe now they would think about this option to do it. And I wish them a best of luck. And I also thank you very much for all that information, and I wish you an amazing day, and good luck with recruiting during this a bit difficult time. But I hope it gets better.
Perfect. No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to speak. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Qualitalks Podcast. I hope you found it interesting and informative. If you liked it, consider sharing it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. Stay compliant, and see you in the next one.